The crown you are reaching for is sitting on a rat trap, and hard work is the cheese. The reason you wake up exhausted, the reason you feel that silent, creeping anxiety that you are falling behind, isn't because you aren't working hard enough. It is because society engineered hard work as the exact mechanism to keep you poor. Niccolo Machiavelli knew a truth that modern billionaires suppress. Wealth is perfectly divorced from labor. If wealth were the result of hard work, the women carrying bricks in the midday sun would own the world. Instead, you are a pawn on a board where the rules were written by kings to keep you moving in straight, predictable lines. To escape the gravity of poverty, you don't need to work harder. You need to stop digging the lake with a spoon and learn the physics of power. You've been told your whole life that if you just put your head down and grind, you'll eventually make it. But let's look at the mathematical reality of that promise. The economist Thomas Piketty spent years analyzing empirical records across 16 developed countries over an entire century. What he found wasn't a theory. It was a terrifying mathematical law. He mapped out the rate of return on capital, which is money working, versus the rate of economic growth, which is human labor. Piketty proved that the return on capital consistently, ruthlessly outpaces the return on labor. In plain English, the money produced by owning things always grows faster than the money produced by doing things. Over 150 years, the average real return on wealth sat comfortably around 6.2%. Meanwhile, the actual economic growth from human labor barely scraped 2.7%. You are mathematically programmed to lose as long as you trade your time for currency. And if you think being smarter than everyone else in your office is going to save you, the data says otherwise. Recent studies analyzing cognitive ability and income have revealed something that should make your blood run cold. A 1 standard deviation increase in cognitive ability yields a respectable 21% increase in labor income. But if you take that exact same intelligence and apply it to capital income, your returns spike by 37%. Being extremely smart while playing a labor game is a losing mathematical equation. You are entirely alone in understanding this reality right now. Everyone around you is still playing the old game, hoping for a different outcome. If you do not delete your worker operating system today and embrace the actual physics of power, you will remain nothing more than a highly efficient battery powering someone else's empire. You know the game is rigged against your labor, but to escape the gravity of poverty, you first need to identify the exact mechanism draining your energy in the dark. So what is the machine actually feeding on? Think about your typical 50-hour work week. You drag yourself out of bed, pour coffee down your throat, and commute to a building where you trade the most finite resource you have, your lifespan, for a number on a screen. Every Friday, you get just enough of that number to keep you coming back on Monday, but never quite enough to actually buy your freedom. But you are not lazy. In fact, you are bleeding energy. You are trapped in what we call middle-class comfort, a heavily engineered state of sedation designed to provide just enough security to prevent a revolt, but never enough leverage to make you free. You look at the rising cost of housing, the stagnation of your wages, and you feel the divergence. Over the last 150 years, the gap between the asset owners and the laborers hasn't just grown, and it has accelerated into an unbridgeable chasm. It is feeling increasingly impossible to sustain a middle-class life because the middle class was a temporary economic anomaly, and the architects of the system are correcting the glitch. Machiavelli understood this dynamic deeply. In his discourses on Livy, he analyzed how the rulers of republics maintain control not through constant violence, but through the instrumental use of religion. They used belief systems to enforce oaths, maintain order, and guarantee predictable, linear behavior from the masses. Today, the architects of our economy don't need ancient deities to keep you in line. They use the modern religion of the corporate 9-to-5. They preach the dogma of loyalty. They enforce the strict observance of the corporate ladder. The belief in a fair, meritocratic reward system is the exact tool used to maintain your consistent, uninterrupted calorie burn. When you complain that it's not fair that someone else makes 10 times your salary while working half as much, you are perfectly playing the role of the devoted follower. Fairness is a concept invented by human beings to make children feel safe in the dark. It does not exist in nature, and it certainly does not exist in the markets. The gazelle doesn't look at the lion and complain about fairness while it's being eaten. The gazelle understands physics. The lion is faster. The lion is stronger. The architects of this system, the institutions, the massive employers, the educational complexes, profit directly from your desire for fairness. They feed on it. When you believe the system is fair, you blame yourself when you fail to get rich. This leads to the ultimate silent struggle, action paralysis. You sit there, exhausted at the end of the day, knowing you need to build leverage, knowing you need to escape, but you tell yourself you can't because you lack technical skills. You think you need to learn to code for 5 years or get an MBA, but your lack of technical skills isn't the root of your paralysis. The root cause is that your mind is fundamentally infected by the linear output model. You still view the world through the lens of a worker. You think that applying leverage means doing what you do now, just slightly more efficiently. Consider the high-status professionals. The doctor billing $1,000 an hour looks like a king to the guy making $20 an hour, but Machiavelli would see them both as peasants, just wearing different clothes. The doctor is still mistaking his golden handcuffs for a throne. He is still a high-paid laborer. If his hands stop working, the money stops flowing. He doesn't own the farm. He is just exceptionally good at shearing the sheep. And because everyone around you worships the doctor, you feel entirely isolated in your ambition. Your friends and family look at you like you're arrogant or temporarily insane for wanting to shatter the ceiling they've all accepted. You are completely alone in this mindset, surrounded by people who will defend the very cage that contains them. Institutions do not fall to external enemies. They fail from internal rot. And the system relies on you maintaining your internal rot, your exhaustion, your self-doubt, your adherence to the dogmas they planted in your head. So the natural instinct, when you finally feel the friction of this reality, is to fight back, using the only tools they taught you. So the natural instinct is to hustle harder, to start a side business, and hire cheap labor to do the work for you. But what if I told you that the traditional path of becoming a boss is the fastest route to financial suicide? The moment you decide to break free, well, your societal programming kicks in and hands you a script. The script says that to build an empire, you need an army, you need mercenaries. You begin the agonizing process of trying to scale your labor. You start a service business. You grind for a few clients, and when you can't handle the workload, you hire your first employee. Suddenly, you have a team. You feel like a CEO, but you haven't bought freedom. You've just inherited a nightmare. Now, Machiavelli dedicated entire chapters to warning the prince about the catastrophic danger of relying on mercenaries. He wrote that human capital is fickle, cowardly, covetous, and inherently self-serving. When you try to build leverage through human labor, you are taking on the most complex, chaotic variable in the universe, the human ego. Managing humans drains your psychological energy. They require constant motivation. They demand management. They complain. They make mistakes. And they will absolutely betray you the second a better opportunity arises. You haven't escaped the system. You've just become the lowest level manager of your own stressful prison. Your profit margins are instantly compressed under the weight of payroll, taxes, and overhead. The leverage of labor is a game for those with extremely high emotional intelligence and a disturbing tolerance for pain. For the average person, building an army of humans leaves you fundamentally susceptible to ruin. So when that fails, you pivot to the next obvious solution. You decide to compete on price. You think, if I just work harder than everyone else and charge a little bit less, I'll capture the market. You start working weekends. You slash your rates to win the difficult clients. You try to out-endure the competition. But this is a mathematical race to zero. Competing on price is a death spiral. By charging less, you don't signal value. You signal desperation. Because your prices are low, you attract the absolute worst kind of clients. Parasites who demand the world, respect nothing, and drain your soul for pennies. You find yourself working 80 hours a week just to maintain the exact same financial anxiety you had when you were working 50 hours a week at your regular job. Your calendar is full, but your bank account is empty, and your spirit is broken. You did everything the hustle culture gurus told you to do, and you are still one missed invoice away from disaster. But here's what's wild. You think playing the prince requires an army of mercenaries. It doesn't. Look at Peter Levels. He is a solo founder who generates over $3 million a year in pure profit. Take a second to let that number actually sink in. $3 million. 0 employees. His profit margin sits comfortably around 90%. He doesn't have a human resources department. He doesn't have project managers or a bloated executive suite. He replaced humans entirely with the leverage of code. While the rest of the world was begging for a 3% annual raise, he sat quietly and built a digital kingdom. He is the modern manifestation of Machiavellian sovereignty. This is the mind-blow moment where the entire paradigm shifts. The supreme shock isn't that you can't build leverage. It's that you've been entirely blind to the new gods of leverage. We are talking about permissionless leverage, code, and media. When Peter Levels writes a script or launches a digital product, that asset doesn't sleep. It doesn't require a pep talk to perform optimally. It doesn't ask for equity, and it will never betray him to a competitor. It stands there on the digital battlefield, 24/7, executing flawlessly. This is why all conventional approaches fail. Conventional approaches attempt to scale linear human effort. Permissionless leverage scales infinitely, with 0 marginal cost of reproduction. You build the software once, and it serves 10 million people just as easily as it serves 10. You record the video once, and it acquires customers for you while you are entirely unconscious. This breaks the fundamental law of labor that you were brainwashed to believe. You no longer need permission from a bank to give you capital. You no longer need permission from a boss to give you a promotion. You no longer need permission from an employee to show up on time. The transition from the laborer to the system architect doesn't require starving in the process. You don't have to quit your job in a blaze of glory and risk everything. You simply keep your 9-to-5 to fund your survival, and you spend your nights and weekends building your robot army. You write code, you create media, you productize your specific knowledge. The beauty of this architecture is its aggressive asymmetry. You are dedicating a small fraction of your time to building things that have an infinite shelf life. You are no longer trading your time for money. You are investing your time into assets that generate money independent of your time. Every piece of code, every video, every system you architect is a loyal soldier added to your digital army. You are slowly, methodically shifting your identity from the guy who lays the bricks to the architect who designs the cathedral. You now possess the blueprint to build an army of digital robots that work while you sleep. But an army without perceived value is just a militia. How do you force the market to hand you wealth when you have absolutely no status today? If leverage is the raw mechanics of wealth, then the psychology of value is the weapon you use to extract it. Let's establish a deeply uncomfortable truth right now. Value is a hallucination. It is not an objective metric based on how hard you sweat. We see this constantly in the real world. Water is essential for every biological function keeping you alive. Yet, it is almost entirely free. A diamond is a completely useless, shiny rock that does absolutely nothing. Yet people will gladly pay millions to possess one. Why? Because of the story we tell about it. Because of scarcity. Because of perceived status. In the marketplace, you are not paid according to your caloric contribution. You are paid strictly according to how hard you are to replace. And this brings us to optic warfare. The goal here is to synthetically manufacture status and wrap your core competence in a narrative of utter indispensability. There is a psychological concept called signaling theory. It explains how humans use observable behaviors to communicate hidden qualities. For a signal to actually be credible to another person, it must be costly. A cheap signal is easily faked, so nobody respects it. This is why status and signaling inherently command massive financial premiums. The data backs this up ruthlessly. Companies that position themselves based on status and exclusivity command, on average, a 38% profit margin premium over competitors who simply sell utilitarian features. They are selling the exact same raw materials, but they are extracting 38% more wealth solely because of the narrative frame. Now, let's look at how this destroys your current career path. Look at the nomenclature premium. According to recent salary benchmark data, An individual selling their labor as a graphic designer averages around $50,000 a year. That person is viewed as a commodity laborer. They move pixels around. Now, take someone producing the exact same set of visual deliverables, but they position themselves as a brand strategist. The average salary instantly jumps to $102,000, with independent strategists easily commanding over $10,000 per project, almost double the income. Why? Did the brand strategist work twice as hard? Did they burn twice as many calories? No. They changed the frame, and therefore, they changed the fee. The graphic designer is selling labor. The brand strategist is selling a vision and a system. They are selling the psychological certainty that a massive business problem is being handled by a master. You are not a freelancer. You are a risk management asset. When wealthy clients hire you, they do not want to know how the sausage is made. They don't care about your workflow or your late nights. They want the feeling of security. They are buying the absolute certainty that you will make them look brilliant for hiring you. So, how do you implement optic warfare when you have zero status and a non-existent portfolio today? You begin by understanding the law of concealment. Machiavelli explicitly advised that a prince should not be seen too often, lest he become common. If you are constantly available, you are cheap. Think about your own behavior. When a client emails you, what do? You rush to reply within 3 minutes because you want to show them you have a good work ethic. You think you are signaling dedication. What you are actually signaling is that your time has virtually zero value, and you have absolutely nothing more important to do than stare at your inbox, waiting for their command. You must manufacture scarcity aggressively. Stop replying to emails instantly. Wait 4 hours. Wait a day. Turn off your read receipts. Create artificial friction. When you are on a discovery call, do not be the one rushing to fill the silence. Use the power of the pullback. Act slightly disinterested in the project. Ask them why you should take on their problem when your roster is already highly selective. When you withdraw your energy, human psychology dictates that they will subconsciously lean in. They will suddenly feel a desperate need to convince you to take their money. By being silent, you allow them to project their own assumptions of your vast intelligence onto your silence. You must curate a persona of extreme competence wrapped in slight dangerousness. People should feel lucky to be permitted to work with you. If you walk into a room, physical or digital, acting like a desperate servant begging for scraps, the world will happily treat you like a servant. But if you walk in like a king in exile, speaking less, demanding more, holding your ground in the silence, people will instinctively wonder when you are returning to the throne. You start this today. The micro-habit of optic warfare is immediate. You audit every single word you use to describe yourself online and in person. You elevate the nomenclature. You delay your availability. You become a ghost to the trivial noise around you. Let your absence dictate your immense value. You now know how to decouple your time and artificially inflate your value to the absolute peak. But the moment you acquire this money, the universe begins conspiring to take it back. How do you survive the chaos of the infinite game? The ultimate separator between the permanently wealthy and the temporarily rich is understanding that wealth building is an infinite game. There is no finish line. There is no bell that rings to announce you've won. It is a biological organism that must survive the brutal, random chaos of the market. And in an infinite game, the primary objective is completely counterintuitive. Your only goal is the avoidance of ruin. Now consider the catastrophic collapse of the long-term capital management hedge fund in 1998. This firm had 2 Nobel laureates on staff. They had some of the most profound cognitive ability on the planet. But they lacked the discipline of the infinite player. They used massive, catastrophic leverage to chase moderate returns. When an unpredictable geopolitical event hit, their mathematical models shattered, and they were wiped off the face of the earth. They were so busy trying to win the game that they fundamentally forgot how to survive it. Ruin is the only thing that removes you from the board permanently. This is why the middle-class mindset of moderate risk is a psychological trap. Most people try to be moderately risky with everything they do. They put all their money in a portfolio of average stocks. They take a moderately secure job, and they end up with a life of total mediocrity, vulnerable to a single, localized crisis. To survive, you must abandon the middle entirely and adopt Nassim Taleb's barbell strategy. What does this incredibly elite strategy actually look like for a guy who only has $2,000 to his name? It is shockingly simple. You become extremely paranoid and boring with 90% of your assets, and terrifyingly aggressive with the remaining 10%. With your $2,000, $1,800 of it is locked away. It is put into dead boring stability, T-bills, cash equivalents. It is your absolute insurance against ruin. You do not touch it. You do not gamble with it. But that remaining $200, that is your aggression. You deploy it into highly asymmetric bets, where the downside is strictly capped at $200, but the upside is potentially millions. You use it to buy domains. You use it to pay for server hosting for your digital products. Remember Peter Levels? He didn't build one massive company. He launched over 70 small projects. 66 of them failed completely, but the 4 that hit made him a multi-millionaire. He survived the failures because his downside was capped, but he exposed himself to massive, fat tail gains. You must stop taking moderate risks. If your business strategy feels like constant, chaotic excitement, you are not an architect. You are an arsonist running around with a fire extinguisher. Excitement is extremely expensive. Dopamine is expensive. Boredom is where wealth is actually compounded. Do not bet the farm. This requires the death of envy. Envy is the ultimate poverty mindset. When you see someone succeeding, if your first instinct is resentment, you are protecting your fragile ego by dismissing their mechanics. Machiavelli taught us to study power, never to judge it. When you see a winner, you do not hate him. You dissect him. You reverse engineer his optics and his leverage. The market is a dense, unforgiving jungle. It does not care about fairness. It does not care about your moral deservingness or how many hours you sweated in the sun. It rewards physics, speed, leverage, and extreme scarcity. Stop screaming into the void about how the system should be, and start mastering what it actually is. The true predator does not broadcast its hustle. The poor broadcast, while the rich signal. When you constantly talk about your grand plans and your ridiculous daily grind, you release the pressure valve. You get a cheap hit of dopamine just from the social validation, and you lose the primal drive required to actually execute in the dark. Conceal your intentions. Build your digital army in absolute silence. Sit quietly and wait for the weak, the emotional, and the greedy to make a catastrophic mistake. I have just showed you the architecture of the matrix, but identifying the walls of your cage does not give you the lockpick.